Let's give you the markets update now. And the Johannesburg Stock Exchange losing some of the gains it had made earlier in the week to close weaker on Thursday on the back of data from the United States. The rand also weakening, losing more than 2% gains made on Tuesday. Well, for an update on the performance at the JSE this Friday morning, we're joined by JustOneLap founder Simon Brown to give us a sense of how things are shaping up. Simon, good morning to you. Let's begin with the question about how the week started on a high. This was for both the JSE and the rand, but it seems to be closing off those gains with a bit of losses here and there. How are market movements this morning?
Morning, Polly. You know what? I think the JSE's perhaps got a bit of a hangover. We had really good inflation data out of the US and the UK Tuesday, Wednesday. That sent local and global markets higher, as the expectation is that rate increases are over, no recession coming, and we can start the debate around when do we start seeing rate cuts. So we saw really strong numbers midweek in the market. We had the rand below 18 at one point. As we're trading now Friday morning, the overall market is pretty much flat. Financials up 0.4%. We've got industrials off a third. We've got resources up 0.25%. If we have a quick look at the rand, 18.42 against the dollar, 22.82 against sterling, and 19.96 against the euro. On the commodity side, oil, Brent 77.44. That's a good number for motorists. Gold 1,988, and in the PGMs, platinum and palladium both a little weaker at 898 and $1,022 per ounce each.
Yeah, let's quickly launch into company news. Sasol announcing Simon Baloyi as the new president and CEO effective April 2024. How's this news being digested?
So the market is a bit sanguine to it. Fleetwood Grobler, who's the departing CEO now, had only been there 4 years. He'd really come in at the end of the Lake Charles disaster. His job was to fix up that. To a fair degree, we could say he had. There are now new challenges for Sasol. And the new CEO, who will take over from April of next year, been at the company for 20 years and very much an oil and chemicals person. I think that's important. That is the core of what Sasol does. And I think a fairly good transition. I think Simon Baloyi is a good insider to take over the position from Fleetwood Grobler. As I said, a bit short of a tenure for Grobler, but perhaps there was just opportunity coming. Sasol did say they looked internal and external for the new CEO and ultimately settled on the internal candidate.
Sure. Well, let's stay with that company, Sasol, because it will be tabling its climate report at its AGM today. Some shareholders clearly against the company's commitments to cutting its emissions. These are big meetings, Simon. So what can we expect from that AGM?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably one of the most robust AGMs we've seen in some time in the South African listed space. The big story around Sasol is their Secunda plant. It is hugely polluting. They need to cut emissions. If they don't cut emissions, the cost of those emissions make the plant simply no longer viable. Of course, cutting the emissions also has implications in that regard. And there is going to be a battle. On the one side, some shareholders are saying, hang on, cutting the emissions, it's going to hurt the business, it's going to hurt profitability. On the other side, you've got folks saying, we simply need a greener world, and if you don't cut those emissions, the costs of not doing it are also going to be onerous. Ultimately, the shareholders will get to decide. The board will take from them what that decision is. What's going to be interesting is which side is Sasol on. My sense is they want to reduce those emissions. In an ideal world, they probably wouldn't. But in a world where we've got global warming, it's critically important.
Sure. Let's conclude the conversation with Anchor Capital, partnering with its UK peer, that's Group Credo or Credo. What will this enable the group or company Anchor Capital to do, and any detail on the specs of this deal?
Yeah, so it's an interesting deal. $2.5 billion that they're paying for the 80% stake. It's got about 100 billion ZAR in assets under management, 15,000 odd net high worth individuals as clients. Peter Armitage, who founded Anchor about 12 years ago, he's always been saying in the last couple of years is that they've kind of got the South African market sorted, but their clients in South Africa want proper international exposure. And yes, Anchor can do that from within the country, but they've been sort of talking around partnering up with an offshore business, perhaps launching an offshore business. I think this is a fairly good idea. The two operations at senior management will be joined, but they'll still operate individually as the two different divisions. But it does mean as a South African client of Anchor, there's now a seamless transition to offshore investing and offshore assets.
Simon Brown is JustOneLap founder. Thank you very much for that markets update.